This week marks National Police Week, a time to remember and honor law enforcement officers around the country and express their appreciation. A new FBI report reveals assaults on law enforcement officers reached a 10-year high through 2023, with over 79,000 attacks. And there are no signs of the rate slowing down. Here to talk about this further is former NYPD officer and founder of Global Security and Investigative Services, Dean Golemis. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, Stephanie. Thanks for having me.
The data from the FBI was released on Tuesday, which also shows how 60 law enforcement officers were killed in the line of duty last year. What are your thoughts on these findings so far?
They're alarming, Stephanie. Numbers of assaults and attacks on our law enforcement officers are at an all-time high. I believe 378 law enforcement officers were shot last year. Not killed, but shot. So that number of fatal officers could have been exponentially greater. This is a great week for us as Americans to reflect and to think of what our life would be like in the United States without these men and women who go out every day to protect us. And I think if you see an officer this week, a simple thank you and we appreciate you would go a long way, especially with so much negative feelings towards law enforcement in this country at the moment.
I want to get to that because we see lawmakers such as North Carolina Senator Thom Tillis introduced and reintroduced the Protect and Serve Act this Congress, noting how it's currently not a federal crime to intentionally harm or attempt to harm a law enforcement officer. It's even received bipartisan support, but we're also seeing, as you said, members, for example, the far left, continue their defund the police movement and these attacks against officers. What would you say to the people who are engaging in this type of rhetoric?
I think they got to stop and reflect about how dangerous this kind of rhetoric actually is. Some people are very susceptible to words, right? So when they see their public officials screaming, defund the police, get rid of the police are no good, the police are bad, there are people that just really take that to heart and they act. I recall two police officers who were shot in New York City by a mentally disturbed young man who was listening to all the rhetoric, and he drove up from the Carolinas to New York City and he shot the first two cops that he saw sitting in the car. It's dangerous. There should be serious consequences, both at the local level and federally, for assaulting an on-duty law enforcement officer. It's unacceptable. These men and women go out to serve us every day, and they deserve for us to have their backs and protect them any way we can.
Yeah, and that goes to show the Vice President of the National Fraternal Order of Police, Joe Grimaldi, said there's no question there is a war on cops in this country. And as you mentioned, crime is running rampant, for example, in New York City. Yet there are progressive district attorneys like Alvin Bragg who's spending time prosecuting Trump. You spent 20 years in the New York Police Department. What would you like to see happen in order to bring down the crime rate?
Well, there's three things driving the crime rate across the whole country, right? It's going to be the bail reform legislation that's been passed in many liberal blue states. It's going to be a lack of support for police, and it's going to be sanctuary city policies. I'd like to talk to you, Stephanie, about the Bail Reform Act, because in New York, as well as Illinois, a lot of people think it's just bail. There were a lot of other moving parts to that whole legislation that tremendously affects law enforcement. Specifically, the revamping of the discovery rules in New York City for defendants. That has put such an incredible burden on law enforcement as far as producing discovery, which is producing evidence so the defense can defend themselves. They put unrealistic goals and expectations on how to turn this evidence over, and it's taking about 10% of law enforcement officers' time just to fulfill that. And this is at a time when recruitment and staffing levels of law enforcement are an all-time low, and it's just further exasperating the crime. I spoke to Sheriff Louis Falco. He was the Rockland County Sheriff here in New York. That's the first northern suburb to come to outside of Manhattan. And out of a department of about 100 sworn officers, he has 6 guys dedicated just to the discovery rules, the new discovery rules. Imagine 10 police officers go to a scene, a shooting, and they arrest somebody. All 10 of their cameras have to be downloaded, documented, labeled, reviewed, forwarded to the DA, forwarded to the defense, within 15 days to the defense, within 5 days to the DA. That's a major effort for one call, one radio call. Mm-hmm. It's just an unrealistic expectation on our already taxed law enforcement officers.
Yeah, absolutely. And you hear, and of course, such populous cities such as New York City, there's bound to be crime, but it's happening in the subways and so on and so forth. And as we near the end of National Police Week, what are some other pressing issues that law enforcement officers deal with that might not be well known to the public that you would want them to know about?
Well, that's a great question. And what I'd like to say is mentally ill people. We used to be able to round up the mentally ill and to commit them if they were a danger to themselves or others for a period of time and get them off the streets. Part of the Bail Reform Act, again, was to get rid of that. Police officers' hands are tied. Just off the top of my head, a 9-year-old girl was punched square in the face in Grand Central Station. Last week, an 11-year-old girl was walking with her mother, holding her mother's hand, and a mentally ill man walked up and unprovoked stabbed her in the back of the head. We have a guy running around the East Village called Ice Pick Nick. That's his name. Everybody knows him. He threatens people every day with an ice pick. He's on the street every day. It's unreal, and something has to give. And going back to staffing and police department staffing, the NYPD is at a 30-year low manpower-wise, and that's why it's more important than ever that companies like my company, Global Security and Investigative Services, we're backfilling the void created by this lack of police. Retailers, corporations, schools, they're hiring private security because the police just don't have the manpower to protect them. Look at your average pharmacy in New York. You want a tube of toothpaste, it's locked up. You have to, a 5-minute trip to the pharmacy now takes you 45 minutes because every single item you want to buy is locked behind plexiglass. And these stores are failing because of that. People aren't going, they're switching to Amazon. Brick and mortar is being further damaged.
Exactly. No, you make some great points right there. As you mentioned, all these everyday products, everyday essentials that consumers want to buy at their local grocery store, they can't because it's locked up. You know, everyone is on a time crunch. Where can our viewers go to learn more about, you mentioned your company, Global Security and Investigative Services. Where can they go to find out more about you and your work?
Well, they can go to the internet, www.global-securityservices.com. And we provide security guards in 5 states. We also do corporate investigations. We assist landlords with squatting problems. That's a huge issue here in New York.
Oh, yeah.
And in these liberal states, you know, we leverage technology and manpower and lobbying to help landlords, you know, with this ridiculous property rights issues here in New York. And again, though, we need some common sense approach to some of these things. And if Alvin Bragg would stop worrying about scoring political points with the Democratic Party, maybe he could go back to what he was elected for, which is to protect the citizens of New York, because it's simply not being done.
Absolutely. Again, former NYPD officer and founder of Global Security and Investigative Services, Dean Galemis, thank you so much again for your time.
Thank you for having me, Stephanie.
Thank you.
For all our viewers asking where One America News is heading in the future, we would like to introduce you to OAN Live. OAN Live is the best way to stay up to date on all of the hard-hitting, straight-shooting, national and international headlines. And the best part is, OAN Live is only $4.99 per month. All the credible, honest, unbiased reporting One America News offers at a fraction of the cost of cable. Just go to OANN.com to easily sign up for OAN Live and stay informed.